Just about every day, we do have an update from Eylon Levy. He is a spokesperson for the Israeli government, and he did provide this briefing a short time ago. I want to play it for you now, raw and unfiltered.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy. Today is day 65 of the October 7th war. We'll begin with an update, and then, as always, we'll take your questions. We begin with an update on the latest figures. Since the start of the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired more than 12,000 missiles at Israel, including from inside the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone. More than 2,000 of those rockets have misfired, the large majority falling inside Gaza on the residents of Gaza. On Friday night, we saw breathtaking footage of missiles flying overhead as a plane landed at Ben Gurion Airport. The 13 Security Council members that voted to leave Hamas free to target our people in this way would never tolerate such a threat to their people, and we are done tolerating it too. The IDF has notified the families of the deaths of 425 soldiers. Of their deaths, the IDF fatalities have risen by 7 since Friday's update, with the confirmed deaths of Staff Sergeant Jonathan Dean Jr. Chaim, Staff Sergeant Chaim Meir Eden, Master Sergeant Reserves Liav Atia, Master Sergeant Reserves Omri Ben Shahar, Sergeant Maor Cohen Eisenkot, Master Sergeant Reserves Naftali Yona Gordon, Sergeant First Class Reserves Omri Rot. That's in addition to 15 seriously injured soldiers over the weekend. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of their families. An update on the hostages. The number of hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza is 137 from October 7th, in addition to 4 predating the massacre. 20 hostages from October 7th have since been murdered by Hamas, with Hamas holding their bodies hostage, including the body of the late Sahar Baruch, whose family was informed of his murder in captivity this weekend. Hamas continues to deny the Red Cross access to the hostages it is still holding in its terror dungeons. We demand the Red Cross appeal to Qatar to exercise its leverage on Hamas to grant those hostages, including the women and children it is still holding, that basic humanitarian mercy of medical care. Our strategy is to continue putting military pressure on Hamas to release all the hostages, just as we successfully created the conditions for the last hostage release pause. Where possible, we will of course try to rescue hostages, and tragically 2 IDF soldiers were severely injured in an unsuccessful rescue operation on Thursday night. An operational update. In recent days, increasing numbers of Hamas terrorists have been surrendering to the IDF and handing over their weapons. As Hamas's grip on power crumbles, its fighters' morale is also collapsing. Our questioning of those surrendered terrorists reveals that Hamas's leadership is disconnected from the difficult situation of its forces on the ground. To date, we have killed 7,000 Hamas fighters at least, and that number will of course rise. Over the past day, ground, air and naval forces have struck over 250 terror targets in Gaza. We have been locating and destroying weapons, conducting targeted raids, and of course destroying underground terror tunnel shafts. For the first time this war, the Artillery Corps has been operating inside the Gaza Strip, striking terror targets in Shuja'iyah, including booby-trapped houses and weapons depots. As the IDF dismantles the Hamas terror state in intense close-quarter combat, Hamas terrorists continue to fight in civilian dress out of civilian facilities. And we continue to expose Hamas's cynical abuse of civilian facilities and UN facilities for its own military purposes. In Beit Hanun, our forces came under fire from forces operating inside a mosque and an UNRWA school. Nobody at the United Nations has condemned Hamas for fighting out of its own schools, by the way. Over the weekend at Al-Azhar University in Rimal, the IDF exposed a terror tunnel leading from the university's yard to a school a kilometre away, in addition to a large weapons cache. During close-quarter fighting with terrorists fighting out of another school, our troops found a tunnel shaft inside a classroom in Shuja'iyah next to AK-47s, grenades and ammo. Our troops also found a teddy bear, you can't make this up, a teddy bear stuffed with sniper sniper rifles and ammunition inside a school. By the way, about a month ago, the World Health Organization put out a propaganda video accusing Israel of striking giant teddy bears in Gaza. I swear it's the truth. You can't make it up. I'll send you the link. So now we find out what the truth is with the giant teddy bears in Gaza. They're being stuffed with sniper rifles and ammunition. We also found weapons concealed in UNRWA bags. Again, no UN condemnation of the abuse of their aid and facilities. Meanwhile, the Hamas army of terror continues to exploit the Al-Muwasi humanitarian zone to launch attacks on Israeli cities, doubling down on the human shield strategy that we are working hard to thwart. On Friday, Hamas launched 3 missile barrages from inside the humanitarian zone, 4 of those rockets landing inside the Gaza Strip. We are demanding that the United Nations firmly condemn Hamas's exploitation of its own facilities and what is supposed to be a safe zone for civilians in Gaza. Until then, it is acting in shameful dereliction of its duties, threatening international peace and security through its complicity and through its silence. In the Hamas terror stronghold of Khan Yunis, IDF forces have been conducting a focused operation, going tunnel to tunnel, house to house. We've successfully eliminated dozens of terrorists there, dozens as part of the 7,000 who have been killed to date. And we have seized Hamas posts, including in schools and mosques. Our forces are deploying the precise Iron Sting munition, directing airstrikes and operations with accurate and precise firepower. An update from the Northern Front. The IDF continues to repel and deter Hezbollah aggression from Lebanon. The Air Force has struck a series of Hezbollah targets, including operational headquarters. Following sirens in the western Galilee in northern Israel, the IDF identified and successfully intercepted suspicious aerial targets entering into our airspace from Lebanon. 2 IDF soldiers were moderately injured, and others sustained light injuries from shrapnel and smoke inhalation. The injured soldiers were evacuated for medical treatment. IAF fighter jets have been targeting Hezbollah terror sites in Lebanon, including infrastructure, launchers and military compounds. Additionally, the IDF thwarted a terrorist cell attempting to launch anti-tank missiles near Zar'it in northern Lebanon. Ongoing IDF operations continue to target Hezbollah in Lebanese territory, and we reaffirm what we have been saying since day one, that the state of Israel is not interested in a war on 2 fronts, and that if Hezbollah chooses to drag Israel into a full-scale war that we are trying to prevent at this point, the consequences for Lebanon and for Hezbollah will be severe. An update on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In light of recent claims by the UN World Food Programme about the availability of food in Gaza, there are 2 main reasons for the reported shortages. 1, Hamas has been stealing aid. And 2, the international agencies that are not condemning this theft aren't managing to distribute aid at the pace that Israel is inspecting it. Since the start of the war, 63,000 tons of aid have entered Gaza, including 6,500 tons of medical aid, and we can give you a more precise breakdown in the Q&A if you want, and more on the medical services being provided in Gaza. On Hamas stealing aid, the IDF has already released video footage of Hamas stealing food and humanitarian aid from civilians in Shejaiya. I hope you've seen the other material that's been circulating about Hamas requisitioning aid from civilians in Gaza. We condemn, of course, this theft of aid from civilians, as Hamas appears intent on sacrificing its own civilians in Gaza in order to keep its own fighters well-stocked and well-fed. As for the international agencies covering up for Hamas by not condemning this theft of international aid, Israel currently has the capacity to inspect more trucks of food, water, medicines and shelter than are currently entering Gaza, and we're upgrading those capabilities even further. The Nitzana crossing can already handle 250 trucks a day, and we're also preparing Kerem Shalom for extra inspections, which are not needed at the moment because there is already excess capacity on our side for the inspection of those trucks to make sure that Hamas is not using them to exploit the corridors in order to import weapons. And obviously, it goes without saying, if Hamas had not declared war on Israel with October 7th and destroyed the Kerem Shalom crossing during the October 7th massacre, there would still be over 500 trucks a day entering the Gaza Strip through Israeli territory. A comment on the shameful scenes at the United Nations on Friday. We salute the United States for its moral courage and leadership in vetoing a UN Security Council resolution designed to keep the Hamas terror regime in power after the October 7th massacre. We think it is outrageous that the UN Secretary General has chosen to use his diplomatic power to try to keep Hamas in power and shield it from the consequences of the massacre that it perpetrated. Israel is doing more, far more, to uphold the international rules-based order than those who are intervening to try to secure the survival of the Hamas terror regime. To France, China, Russia, Albania, Brazil, Ecuador, Gabon, Ghana, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, Switzerland and the United Arab Emirates, and the United Kingdom, which abstained on that resolution, we say it is impossible to support the elimination of Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre, while on the other hand trying to end the war in a way that leaves Hamas standing, free and emboldened to perpetrate more October 7th massacres against our people, as it has been consistently threatening to do since the moment it retreated back into the Gaza Strip with 250 hostages in tow. Israel will continue our just war to eliminate Hamas, bring back all the hostages and restore security. That's it for today's update. We'll now take your questions. As always, if you'd like to send us questions in advance, we'll be able to get answers from you from the relevant authorities. And if you want to type questions in the chat, we'll move on to the Q&A now, please. Thank you.
Question from Kirsty Hickey. Both sides acknowledge intense fighting in the north. Not long ago, the IDF said it was near to finishing its operations in the north. So why has fighting reignited to this degree?
A question on the fighting in the north. Hamas has embedded itself very deeply within civilian areas. It spent the last 16 years deliberately and cynically building its infrastructure inside those areas. And after the IDF completed the encirclement of Gaza City, there were many Hamas fighters who remained inside the city, including in those tunnels that were built and we've been exposing under schools, mosques and hospitals. Now, in recent days, we've seen increasing numbers of Hamas terrorists surrendering to IDF forces, and our interrogations of those fighters are revealing the collapse of morale and the disconnection between the Hamas leadership in Khan Yunis and the fighters who are on the ground. And we will continue those operations against the Hamas fighters who continue to try to ambush our forces, and will, of course, accept any Hamas terrorists who choose to surrender with a white flag and their hands above their heads.
Question from Frank Langfit. How long will it take for IDF to take over Gaza? We see in Israeli papers anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months. Please let us know your estimates.
We've set targets, not deadlines. This war will continue as long as is needed, not a day more, not a day less. Of course, we too want this war to be over, but we need this war to be over in a way that ensures that Hamas can never again hurt our people. And that's why this war will end with the end of Hamas, so that the Gaza Strip can never again be used as a base for attacks against our people. And we say to all our allies and friends around the world who are concerned to conclude this war quickly, as we would of course like this war to be over, that the swiftest way to do that is to ensure that the IDF continues to operate against Hamas with all its force, while upholding our various obligations under international law, of course, but continue thumping Hamas with precision strikes and that door-to-door fighting we're seeing inside the Gaza Strip, so that its reign of terror can end.
Question from Hannah Julie in the Jewish Press. How many tunnel shafts in Gaza have been destroyed since October 7th? And separately, how many of the tunnels to which they lead have been destroyed? How many miles of tunnels still exist beneath Gaza?
In response to your question, I believe the latest figure I saw was that we'd exposed 800 tunnel shafts and destroyed 500, but those details are from a few days ago, and if you'd like to drop us a message, we will check the latest figures. But specific operational questions, I would refer to the IDF spokesperson's unit. That is, of course, the source for all information regarding operational matters inside the Gaza Strip.
Question from Leo Soroka, the Washington Post. Have any soldiers been disciplined for taking videos while in Gaza, as well as for filming, looting and vandalism in Gaza?
Questions regarding IDF operations, we would refer you to the IDF spokesperson's unit. The behavior that you are alluding to is, of course, completely inappropriate and contrary to IDF values. We trust that those cases will be investigated and handled accordingly. And any sort of vandalism, of course, we completely condemn.
Question from Abdel Karim Al-Tinawi from I24 News. Is there a number of assassinated Hamas leaders? And who are the most prominent of those leaders? Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul, for your question. We know that the Israel Defense Forces have killed at least 7,000 Hamas fighters, among them both foot soldiers but also senior commanders from their operations and intelligence. And the IDF has been releasing on a daily basis profiles of those senior terrorists and terrorist masterminds who have been killed. And I would refer you to the press releases that have already been put out from the IDF, where, as I said, every day they are updating about the senior Hamas terrorists that we have been specifically targeting in the course of this war.
Question from Reuters. Jordan's foreign minister today accused Israel of conducting a systematic effort to empty Gaza of its people. Your response?
These are, of course, outrageous and false accusations. Israel is fighting to defend itself from the monsters who perpetrated the October 7th massacre, and the purpose of our campaign is to bring those monsters to justice and ensure that they can never again hurt our people, as Hamas has been using the Gaza Strip over the last 16 years in its reign of terror in order to hurt the people of Israel. As we do that and we go after the Hamas monsters responsible for the October 7th massacre, we are urging civilians to get out of harm's way to the designated safe zone, and we think that people who are concerned for the safety of civilians in Gaza should be urging evacuations towards the safe zones instead of areas of Hamas operations, and should, it goes without saying but unfortunately needs to be said, condemn Hamas for its exploitation of that humanitarian zone, shooting rockets out of it at our cities.
Question from Leo Sands, The Washington Post. Do you have any more information about the death of hostage Sahar Baruch in Hamas captivity? Was his death connected to the hostage rescue operation attempted by the IDF, as announced on Friday?
Hi, Leo. We can't comment any further on the circumstances of Sahar Baruch's death. We are, of course, aware of the attempts that Hamas is making through a very graphic psychological warfare to try to terrorize the people of Israel, and we hold Hamas solely and squarely responsible for the fate of all the hostages it has been holding in inhumane conditions without access to the Red Cross, and we're demanding their immediate and unconditional and safe return.
Coach Winehouse Tribunal Forum launching new publication for war crime tribunals, Globe Banner. Who will be the best point person in the government for answering questions related to reported Nuremberg-like trials that may be forthcoming?
Israel announced in response to the October 7th massacre that we will bring all the Hamas October 7th monsters to justice, and justice can, of course, take many forms.
And a final question. At COP28, some activists...
Sorry, question from whom, please?
We haven't got the asker. At COP28, some activists are accusing Israel of practicing water apartheid against Palestinians in Gaza. This presumably refers to the cut-off of some water to Gaza during the war. Your response?
No. First of all, water apartheid is a bizarre accusation to try to make up. Israel has two pipelines delivering water to the people of Gaza. One of those pipelines was struck by a Hamas mortar in the early days of the conflict and then had to be repaired under fire. If we're talking about water infrastructure, it's worth mentioning that Hamas also released a video boasting that it had dug up water pipelines inside the Gaza Strip in order to turn them into rockets, but there are two water pipelines providing water from Israel into the Gaza Strip. Before this war, Israel was providing only 7.7% of Gaza's water. The rest was locally sourced and treated, including from desalination plants, next to which Hamas has been firing rockets and recklessly putting those desalination plants in danger. The same desalination plants from which Hamas has, of course, been withholding the necessary fuel as it continues to sit on fuel stockpiles for its own war machine. Since the beginning of the war, as part of the 63,000 tons of humanitarian aid, 11,580 tons of water have entered, in addition to those two pipelines, on board 574 trucks. And as we said, we want to see more water, food, medical supplies and shelter reach the people of Gaza and the civilians who need it. There are no limitations on Israel's part. We have excess capacity at the moment to inspect trucks. We're creating excess capacity, and any problems regarding delivery are related to the capabilities of the UN agencies on the ground. We, of course, want to make sure that all humanitarian aid reach the people of Gaza who need it, while making sure Hamas cannot steal it.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll update you on the time of the daily press conference tomorrow. Everyone keep safe. Thank you very much, and happy Hanukkah. Thank you.